And that's 6. You know, I thought the neon signs would have dissuaded people, but they really worked. Hello Satumblers, and welcome to Don't Inspect Us Inc., where the least ethical and effective tests are conducted, all to understand satisfaction, specifically in games. What is it? Where does it come from? What game has the most of it? And what game has the least of it? Well, one question answered already. This is off to a flying start. Your first instinct upon hearing this might be to say, but Vinci, satisfaction is subjective. There's no way to find out which game is most satisfying objectively. And you would be right, dear viewer, if it wasn't for my brand new technological marvel, the Come Up With a Better Name Later 2.0. Okay, the name is probably the most work in progress part, but the machine itself will allow me to obtain perfect objective data to answer all my questions about satisfaction. By simply connecting to all our legally willing test subjects to be able to get precise measurements of satisfaction. And it's perfectly safe too, except for the small part where it lowers your life expectancy by about 10 to 15 years with each use. But enough about the technicalities. How is this gonna work? Well, testing every game is simply unfeasible. There's probably more than 30, maybe even 50 games in existence. I don't have the kidnapping budget to test all of those. However, it's still important to represent all the different kinds of satisfaction to be able to understand it fully, which is why I came up with 4 categories of gaming satisfaction, differentiated by their feel and cause. This way we can still get a good idea of all the different kinds of satisfaction without needing to look at every game ever. So let's start with one of the most common types of satisfaction. Challenge satisfaction, which comes from overcoming a difficult challenge, usually a boss, or proving you are better than all the 9-year-olds at the laser tag game. Now, immediately you may notice that this is a very loose definition. Because it is, and that's because a loose definition is best for defining abstract things like satisfaction. To better understand this kind of satisfaction, before looking into the hard data, we should probably look at some kind of example. What is a game or genre famous for satisfying challenges? Oh, right! How could I forget Star Sector, the most famous challenge game that gets a new video made about it every like 3 seconds. And I mean, it's really good, but it's a bit too mainstream, so I'm gonna pick something a little less famous. A small indie game called Hollow Knight Silksong? A little forgotten gem with some really challenging boss fights. Now, the specific example of challenge satisfaction I want to analyze is the satisfaction that comes from defeating a hard boss, since it's one of the most common and probably the one you think of when satisfying challenge comes up. So, we must first pick a boss fight to use as an example, and to do that we need to understand what makes a boss fight satisfying so we can pick the best candidate. Obviously, challenge is important. While there is satisfaction in beating a boss on the first try, or in being so strong that a boss doesn't even pose a challenge to you, the satisfaction of beating a boss that bullied you for an hour is generally greater, and it's exactly the kind we care about right now. Other than challenge, another important factor is learning. By that I mean learning attack patterns, when to dodge, when to punish, etc, etc. It doesn't even necessarily have to be learning the fight itself. It could also be learning the boss's weaknesses, or how its AI works, or anything. This means that this can also apply to bosses in turn-based games per se, where you generally don't really have to learn attack animations or whatever. Oh, it seems like that was enough to have the machine pick a boss fight. What? For some reason it picked 2 boss fights? Let me take a look. It's Cogwork Dancers, makes sense, yeah. And Growl the Great, and the data from these 2 is so different. I don't understand. Maybe they're just like a different type? I got it! They must be different types. Yes, as my Nobel Prize winning realization says, there exists 2 types of challenge satisfaction for bosses, and their official names are, ah yeah, I did it, and I'm finally done with this misery. and I may hope that it never befalls on me again, but alas, I am not so lucky. Great concise names, right? I know, I picked them myself. The thing that differs the two is fundamentally enjoyment. The first comes from beating an enjoyable challenge, and the second comes from beating a really unpleasant challenge. Now, enjoyment is made up of a lot of things. How long it takes to restart, how quickly do you lose, how annoying are the mechanics, but the one I'm most interested in is fairness. Mostly because one is exceptionally fair and one is exceptionally unfair. Grohl feels unfair because to even fight him, you have to defeat a horde of extremely annoying enemies which can only be hit when they feel like it, something that the boss itself does often, sometimes even spawning more enemies for you to deal with. His other attacks require a certain degree of mobility to avoid as well, something that's made riskier by the fact that there's only 4 platforms, and if you miss, you get the worst debuff in the game, making healing impossible. This feels extremely unfair, and combined with the extremely long, or shorter but secret and still annoying, distances from benches, the fight is definitely deserving of the misery category. Fortunately, explaining why something feels fair is a lot easier, especially with the Cogwork dancers, since they are perhaps the most fair boss fight possible, as they perfectly telegraph when, where, and how they will attack every single time, by having extremely clear visual cues and literally moving to the beat. They also remain damageable for a majority of the fight, and they give plenty of openings to punish, and oh, the machine has processed them again with my new discovery. Oh, interesting. But I'm gonna keep the score that challenge satisfaction got a secret so I can reveal all the scores at the end to keep the suspense. No, wait, no. You can't. You gotta wait, otherwise the scores will be meaningless. Duh. Anyway, the next category I want to cover is I'm so smart satisfaction, which is the satisfaction that comes from doing things that make you feel smart, aka solving puzzles, creating and executing strategies, and planning. Now, this category is in a lot of ways similar to the previous one. The most obvious comparison is that a significant amount of the satisfaction behind solving a puzzle comes from the challenge aspect of how much you might struggle with it at first, and the satisfaction that comes with overcoming that challenge. But not only does this satisfaction feel different from the regular challenge satisfaction, it also has some other peculiarities, so I decided to make it its own category. And the game I chose to showcase it is oh, right. One of the most important things to talk about with I'm so smart satisfaction is that if you are spoiled about the answer and thus don't figure it out yourself, it loses a lot of its strength. So this is your spoiler warning for blueprints, which sounds a lot like blueprints, something I definitely knew from the start of the game and didn't figure out like 10 hours in. Blueprints is a roguelike, where you build and explore a house at the same time by picking blueprints for each room and letting the minimum 300 building contractors you have on standby put the room together. And it's the perfect example of I'm so smart satisfaction, because it has both the strategic planning of picking the correct rooms and the puzzle solving of putting the clues together to figure out the secrets of the manor. First, let's talk about puzzles, as they are the most common and obvious cause of I'm so smart satisfaction. What makes a puzzle satisfying? Well, of course there's the challenge aspect I mentioned earlier, but that's not all. A challenging puzzle is easy to make. You just make it impossible to figure out. What's necessary for a satisfying puzzle are hints, something that Blueprints is full of. Wherever you go, you will find hints that are either for that room's puzzle or maybe another room that you might not even know about. And this is important. Hints should be rewards for being observant, like noticing that the numbers on this table correspond to a series of elements on the periodic table, or a hint telling you that the paintings in each room hide a message of some kind. It's important that the hint be vague, but not too vague. If it's too obvious, you don't feel smart for figuring it out, you feel like you've just been given the answer. And if it's too vague, you have no idea what it means, and thus it feels meaningless, leading you to discard it and feel dumb for not understanding it. The way to balance it out, and the way that Blueprints does it, is by having many hints scattered everywhere, that each by itself is quite vague. But once put all together, they are a lot more clear. And that's where the second part of the satisfaction of puzzles comes in, the click moment, when all the hints come together and you figure it out. It's the payoff of the hints and the thing that makes you feel like a super genius, even if the puzzle wasn't actually that hard. This sort of click moment is also what applies to the strategic/planning side of the I'm so smart satisfaction. Though in those cases, it's not hints clicking together, but game knowledge and experience which allows you to figure out a plan. Be it picking the correct rooms to not get locked in greed jail, or planning the correct positioning and strategy in an RPG. The satisfaction from the strategic/planning side comes from the click of figuring out the plan and acting on it. And when the plan is successful, you get the I'm so smart satisfaction of having figured out a way to overcome the obstacles. Or it can fail and you can feel like an idiot for trying to set the fire elemental on fire or only picking left turn. Ah, that seems to be enough to get a final scoring. Ooh, I won. Okay, I will stop. Okay, moving on to the next type of set. Was that door always there? Let's see what's inside. Oh, a desk? Oh, a desk with the research for a time travel device. Hey everyone, I figured out time travel again. Just another day in the office for me, huh? But did you see what I did there? I saw an interesting place, explored it, and was rewarded for it. That's the basis for the next type of satisfaction, exploration satisfaction, which, if it wasn't obvious, is the satisfaction that comes from exploring a cool place and being rewarded in some way for your curiosity. This kind of satisfaction is a core part of basically any game that isn't super linear, which means there are plenty of examples to draw from. But the one I would like to look at comes from all the way before a significant amount of you were born. Thief, a game with extremely open maps to Huh? What? What do you mean nobody's heard of it? You know Thief, right? Really? Fine. I meant Baldur's Gate 3, winner of one of Vinci's favorite games of all time, and other less prestigious awards. Baldur's Gate 3 is probably one of the most full games of all time. It really feels like there's no rock you can turn without summoning a fairy that asks you to help her with her computer. And that makes it the perfect example for exploration satisfaction. Brings us to its first variable, size, meaning how much is there to explore? How many things are there to find? The best example of how Baldur's Gate 3 ranks in this comes from the final area of the game. Baldur's Gate not quite 3 yet. An area where basically only 2 houses don't have something for you to find, which is insane. However, as every confident man says at any opportunity, size isn't everything. And they would be right. If size was the only variable, I would be talking about a Ubisoft game. Ugh. Thankfully, there's another variable that balances size out. Boring people call it content. I call it cool stuff, patent pending. Cool stuff is what you actually find while exploring. Is it like 2 bucks and a couple of guys to fight? Or is it a new area, or a new quest, or an epic weapon, or a really cool rock? Fundamentally, this is just the reward for your curiosity, and thanks to the machine, we can now know for sure what rewards are best. Just gotta wait for it to process. Still can't believe Thief isn't more popular. That's so unfair. Oh, it's done. Alright, well, the rewards from worst to best are a small or medium amount of money, a bunch of enemies, just like a cool place, a good amount of treasure, a unique item of some sort, a quest, a new area, and a really cool rock. Well, it's clear that having really substantial rewards is the way to go. However, substantial rewards take a lot of development to make. And also, hiding a cool area or quest somewhere that you have to find and thus can miss needs a certain level of confidence in the rest of the game and is definitely riskier, which is why cool stuff and size are usually inversely related. If you want to have 2,000 places to look, putting cool stuff everywhere would take so long that the main competitor your game would have would be the heat death of the universe. Which is why, to bring size up, cool stuff must go down, and similarly, if you want to have cool stuff, you will usually have to bring size down. So let's check Baldur's Gate 3. What? Wait, I forgot one metric. Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. Baldur's Gate 3 is massive. and full of cool stuff. Your reward for exploration is basically never just 5 dudes and $5. It's always at the very least some unique treasure or cool area with its own quest, which feels extremely satisfying, especially knowing that a ton of people must have missed it. However, size and cool stuff aren't the only two variables of exploration satisfaction. The final one is density. Or more accurately, do I have to run for 30 minutes to get to the next cool thing? This last variable isn't a deal breaker, but it definitely has an impact on how satisfying exploration is. Because if between cool things there are like 30 to 40 minute breaks of running, the exploration feels bogged down and it can lessen the cool factor of rewards. Baldur's Gate 3 is quite compact, meaning the travel between thing to explore and thing to explore is more of a pace breaker than a real annoyance. Oh, that seems to have been enough to satisfy the arbitrary data requirements of the machine. What? I'm not saying anything this time, I learned my lesson, okay? Anyway, there's only one type of satisfaction left. The most obvious, but most difficult to explain. Monkey satisfaction. The satisfaction that pleases your primal inner monkey. And that's about it as far as definitions go. The best I can do to try to understand it is look at examples of it and maybe try to understand something, though I'm pretty sure the answer is just gonna be, it just be like that. But let's try so I have plausible deniability. Well, first let's find some examples of it. The first that comes to mind are satisfying sound effects and visuals. Then I would say big numbers are also definitely monkey, then loot explosions, then regular explosions, then actually that's enough. It's not all of them, but hopefully I'll be able to draw some kind of conclusion from these. Well, first we have sound effects and visuals. These are satisfying because they are rewards for correctly playing the game. That's all I can say other than, yeah, they look and sound nice. This one is definitely one of the, it just be like that, so let's move on to something I might actually be able to get more out of. Big numbers, like big damage numbers, which tells us one of the aspects of monkey satisfaction is a satisfaction of progressing, going from weak baby to god. And once again, monkey satisfaction is used as a reward for correct play. Let's see if the trend continues with the next example, loot explosion. Well, kind of. I think this is a combination of visuals and sound effects with big numbers to amplify the satisfaction that comes with getting a ton of cool stuff, giving you some monkey satisfaction as well as a more mechanical reward for correct play. So I guess it fits? Let's look at the last one. Destroying stuff. Well, like loot explosions, I think that audio and visuals are part of the reason why it's satisfying. However, there's another half that's purely about the destruction, which is hard to put in the reward for correct play camp because it generally can't be used as a reward since it's something you have to actively participate in, which does put my theory into question. I already published my paper this time. Ha! I got you. You thought that was my theory? Nope, I already published a paper on this. And guess what? Yep, 3 for 3. You may ask, how do I do it? I'm just better than everyone else. It's that Nope. No, that's it. I'm done. I quit. And you know what? That machine was never hooked up to the test subjects because you forgot to do it. It's been hooked up to you this whole time. There's no objective data. It's always agreed with you because you are the data source, so it just repeats your opinions. I expect my paycheck in the mail tomorrow. Goodbye. Sheesh. Talk about jealousy. Someone couldn't accept that I was smarter than them. I'm sure that stuff about the machine isn't even true, but I might as well check. Oh yeah, it was connected to me this whole time. Well, I am always correct, so I'm sure the outcome didn't change that much. Well, even though the test subjects weren't harmed, they were still kidnapped. Fortunately, Joe didn't read his contract, and so all legal charges went to him, which means I didn't even have to give back my Nobel Prizes. Anyway, originally I thought about like a bunch more satisfaction types, but they were either too complicated or too I got hooked on RPGs and this isn't really interesting, so let's cut it so I don't go insane editing. But yeah, subscribe, like, and comment what type of satisfaction you like, or you will become the next test subject.